We have to talk about education, though. We had new NAEP scores that had Wisconsin worse than Mississippi. Achievement for black students is it's the worst in the nation. And we got to do something about it. Lauren Greuel, and I hope I'm saying your name right, Lauren, from the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, joins me on the program on the Middleton Ford Hotline. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, Vicki. Thank you for having me this morning.
Well, my pleasure. My pleasure. So, Mississippi, Alabama, West Virginia. Like, people in Wisconsin kind of look down their nose at states like that. You know, they shouldn't, but they do. They think they're backward. They think they don't have good services. Their schools are doing better than ours. So when you're worse than Mississippi, when Mississippi did used to have really bad schools and now they have better schools in Wisconsin, I mean, come on. So, it seems like we're just in a race to the bottom in Wisconsin, and there are things we could do. What are some of those things? Simple things.
Yeah. So the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty is doing a lot of math work right now because of the crisis that you just explained. We're seeing more and more money being thrown at schools that do not have effective education results, right? We're spending millions of dollars in our state every year on education. It's one of the highest line items in our budget. But yet we're not seeing the results. In fact, we're seeing backward progress. Overall performance is trending in the wrong direction, especially since COVID. So what do we do about it, right? And we saw a huge push a couple of years ago for additional literacy improvements to improve our reading scores. And there was a big bill, Act 20, that set forth a lot of new literacy goals. And part of what we are continuing to talk about at Will is how can we do that for math? Because reading literacy is immensely important, but so are math skills. And strong math skills open the door to higher earning jobs, greater career mobility, and lower employment. And it equips people, citizens, to navigate everyday decisions from managing their finances to interpreting statistical data that they see on their TV screens.
But let's go back to literacy for a second. When that bill was passed, which was a bipartisan piece of legislation that was going to use the concept of phonics or direct instruction to improve reading, because whole language reading programs have been an abject failure, okay? Tony Evers held the money, wouldn't distribute the money, lost. He lost, but again, the rules that he can write now because he is King Tony Evers mean that money likely never actually reaches the types of literacy programs intended by the legislature. And Supreme Court said that's okay. So I don't think we're getting the literacy improvements out of that. I mean, it was actually better than modest out of that good piece of legislation that could have made a pretty quick impact on reading. So before we get to math, I want to stay on reading for a sec. Reading sucks too. And it doesn't seem like people in power are looking to try to let the legislative intent of that legislation do its work.
I 100% agree with you, Vicki. Honestly, it's just higher up, like our governor, like, our Department of Public Instruction, squabbling over money, being money hungry with these programs and not actually distributing it the way that it needs to be distributed for students to be able to have the curriculum and the literacy coaches and the time that they need to improve their literacy scores. And I think it's really reflective of the priorities that are being pushed in education right now, particularly in Wisconsin. That's not happening in some of the earlier states that you mentioned, like Mississippi. They're focusing on reading and math. We're
Yeah, not
focusing
diversity,
on a
equity,
whole
and
bunch of
inclusion.
other things.
Right. They're not
Right.
obsessed with DEI and trying to figure out ways to teach kids about anal sex. They're focusing on getting those kids to read and do math. Now to math. We have another, new idea in math. It's not new anymore. It's probably 30, 40 years old. This new way to teach math, which is completely confusing, and parents can't help their kids because they were taught a different method. So you could do the same to math that you did to reading, right? You get rid of that ridiculous system, the pedagogy of whatever, the philosophy of education that they claim this is better. It's not. It's shown to not be better. In the exact same way, almost the same type of legislation, right? But again, we're going to hit the same wall, assuming this legislation can be passed, in that if the governor of the state of Wisconsin doesn't want to deliver on the intent of the legislature, and he wants to write rules to make it the exact opposite, I guess he's got the green light to do that by our court.
Right. I mean, that's a huge problem that, the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty definitely has our eye on. We've been talking about it a lot internally. But I'll also say that when it comes to some of this math improvement that we're looking at, it has a lot more to do with changing how information is conveyed to students versus what that information is. So with reading, there's a whole, they have to turn away from 3Qing and some of these things, like you're saying, these pedagogical ideas that don't actually work, and get all new curriculum and all new instructional material, and they have to basically relearn how to teach it. And with math, you don't actually have to change the instructional material so much as the delivery of the material. So it might be a little bit easier to implement than some of this literacy curriculum we've started with reading.
Yeah, because, just going back to old algorithms isn't hard. That's not, right. Math book's a math book. The big one is Tony Evers walking away from the one big beautiful bill, tax credits to give parents access to tutoring or other types of resources that could help their kids catch up if they wanted. That one has no explanation except Tony Evers hates kids. I mean, that's the only explanation. He wants kids dumb and illiterate and struggling, because otherwise you would take this money, because the Democrats love free money from the federal government.
Truly. And I'll just mention already, even before this tax credit bill, there are many blue states all over the country that have their own SGOs already in place. This isn't even like a right or left political issue. It's just Tony Evers being difficult. There's literally no downside to having this money come in, especially because it can be used for both public and private education. And that's what school choice really all comes down to. Parents can make the decision to send their kids to private school, but a vast majority of them will choose and continue to choose and should be able to choose public schools. So we can't abandon public schools either, which is why this math instruction is so important and why it's so ridiculous that Tony Evers has said that he wouldn't even entertain this tax.
No, he won't even entertain it. Here's the thing. It goes for public, private, charter, homeschool. It can go for tuition, tutoring, transportation. So you want to exercise your rights as a parent under open enrollment, but, it's going to be tough to get your kid to the school. You can use this tax credit to cover transportation, other types of, supplementals that could be, your kid's very advanced. You want to make sure your kid stays accelerated. It could be for therapy. It could be for, any number of different things would qualify. And Evers just said, but the one big beautiful bill said the governor had to sign off, had to agree to it. And Evers like, nah. Now we like being lower than Mississippi. We like having achievements for black students that is the worst in the nation. We like that a lot. We don't want to have any additional resources that might help parents.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of round out this conversation, because I know that talking about some of these tax credit bills, the big beautiful bill, some of these math reforms is a lot, especially today. I just want to take my Will hat off for one single second and say that my sincerest condolences and prayers go out to Charlie Kirk's wife, Erica, and his two beautiful kids. But I was reminded so much yesterday and in our conversation today why his legacy is so important, because it is continuing to fight for common sense every single day across the board in education, at the governor and state level, And that's something that we all need to continue to do, not just in his name and in his legacy, but, to ensure that America stays on the right track. It's all connected and it's all important. And it's something we need to continue to have conversations about so that we can continue to push the truth and common sense back into the bloodstream of America.
Couldn't agree more. And, education's importance in the battle for, reset to normalcy and decency is immense. Charlie Kirk, one of the things he led with, besides God, was parents and children. The desire to see the family in the United States as strong as possible. And you're going to need education to do that. Remember, Bill Ayers, in a speech in Venezuela to Hugo Chavez, said the motor force of revolution begins in the schools. And Kirk knew that. And you know that, and I know that. And if we give up, if there's one place where the battle where did Charlie Kirk do battle? Campus. If there's one place you need to put your energy to fight, it is education. It is to say 4% proficiency in reading and math for black kids is not only unacceptable, we won't tolerate it. It's not tolerable. And 30% proficiency in reading and math overall is not something we will even tolerate. And if we could get more, I swear, Lauren, if we could get people to understand, if they only fought in that realm, I think America could easily see a very, very optimistic, bright, and solid, stable future.
I 100% agree, Vicki, and it is something that, I devote my entire career to. We're at Will. We have specific education attorneys and policy experts like Dr. Flanders who devote all of their time and attention to energy because it is truly fundamental, such a building block to ensure that future citizens in our country are, able to read and write and do math and be able to think for themselves. It's truly foundational.
I hope the legislature leads on this. I know Will is working on this, and you've proposed some ideas. The legislature, I don't know. It feels like surrender in the legislature. I certainly hope that's not true. We have a big election coming up for governor. That could be a big game changer. I hope that there are legal strategies to take this issue of rulemaking back to the Supreme Court, so every single piece of legislation can't be undone without oversight. But again, we got behind the 8 ball in Wisconsin. We should have never let ourselves get behind the 8 ball in Wisconsin. We did. I guess we got to reckon with that and hopefully fight on. Lauren Greuel, thank you very much from Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty.
Thanks, Vicki.